I saw 2 kittens and 2 German shepherds tied to a tree with a note next to them that read, "Let them starve to death, useless creatures." I always have that scene in my mind, and it will shock you too. Please subscribe and comment, "I love animals," and where you are watching from. By doing so little, we make a big difference. A subscription and a comment are just like making a donation, because the video reaches more hearts, more eyes, and more ears, and we raise awareness among an entire population. The cold was a physical thing, a predator that had gnawed its way through the thin layers of my coat, through my worn flannel shirt, and was now feasting on my bones. Last night had been a particularly bad one. The damp chill of a New York autumn had settled deep into the marrow of the city, and the park bench I called a bed offered no sanctuary. My world had shrunk to the size of this ache, a dull, persistent throb that started in my joints and radiated outward. I was adrift in a sea of gray concrete, gray sky, the gray, phantom-like figures of people hurrying past, their faces turned away from the unpleasantness of my existence. I pushed myself up, my body groaning in protest. Hunger was a hollow cavern in my stomach, a familiar companion. My first thought, as it was every morning, was survival. A half-eaten bagel in a trash can, a few dollars from a sympathetic soul. These were the victories that punctuated my days. I was scanning the ground, my eyes trained to spot the glint of a lost coin or the promise of discarded food, when I saw them. At first, my numb, sleep-deprived brain refused to process the image. It was too bizarre, too cruel, a tableau from a fever dream. Across the manicured lawn, wrapped around the thick, indifferent trunk of an old oak tree, was a living sculpture of misery. 2 German shepherd dogs, their noble forms constrained and humiliated, were bound tightly to the bark with wide silver duct tape. Tucked between them, held in place by the same brutal bands, were 2 tiny kittens, twin patches of tabby fur, their faces masks of silent terror. I blinked, certain it was a hallucination, a cruel trick of a mind starved of both food and hope. But the scene didn't dissolve. It remained, sharp and horrifyingly real against the backdrop of yellowing autumn leaves. The dogs were young, their paws too big for their bodies, their magnificent coats matted with dirt. One panted heavily, his long pink tongue lolling out, a sign of extreme stress. The other stood rigid, his head bowed in a posture of utter defeat. The kittens were frozen, their green eyes wide with a terror so profound it seemed to steal the very air from their tiny lungs. And then I saw the note. It was a crude piece of cardboard, tacked to the tree just below the animals, the words scrawled in thick, angry black marker. "Let them starve to death, useless creatures." The words were a punch to the gut, a blast of pure, unadulterated malice that was more chilling than the autumn wind. This wasn't just abandonment. This was a statement. It was a performance of cruelty, a public declaration of hatred for the innocent. Who could do this? What kind of black, twisted soul conceives of such an act, wraps living, breathing creatures in tape, and leaves them to die as a piece of public art? For a long moment, I did nothing. I was a ghost, a spectator. The man I was, the man I had become, was conditioned to not interfere, to not be seen. To be seen was to be judged, to be moved along, to be a problem for someone else to solve. My first instinct was not to be a hero, but to survive. But the sight of those 4 pairs of terrified eyes, the sheer, calculated evil of the note, it pierced the thick gray apathy that had become my shield. A flicker of something old, something I thought had died long ago, ignited in the cold, empty cavern of my chest. It was anger. But what could I do? A man like me, a ragged shadow on the edge of society, had no voice. To approach them directly might scare them further. To be seen tampering with them might bring the wrong kind of attention. I needed help. I needed someone to listen. I turned my back on the horrifying scene. The image seared into my brain and walked toward the edge of the park where the river of pedestrians flowed. I held out a trembling, dirt-caked hand to the first person who passed, a businessman in a sharp suit, his face buried in his phone. "Sir, please," I rasped, my voice hoarse from disuse. "There are animals tied to a tree. They need help." He didn't break his stride. He didn't even look up. He simply sidestepped me as if I were a piece of garbage on the sidewalk. I tried again. A young couple, holding hands and laughing. "Please, miss, you have to listen," I pleaded, my voice cracking with desperation. "Dogs, kittens, they're going to die." The woman's laughter died. She pulled her hand away from her partner and clutched her purse, her eyes wide, not with compassion, but with fear. Of me. Her boyfriend stepped in front of her, his face a mask of contempt. "Get lost, you freak," he spat before pulling her away. Freak, crazy, drunk. The words were stones hurled at me by a dozen different faces as I tried again and again to get someone, anyone, to stop, to listen. They saw my ripped jeans, my matted beard, my wild, desperate eyes, and they saw not a man trying to help, but a threat to be avoided. My invisibility was a curse. They looked right through the human being and saw only the tattered costume of homelessness. My desperation mounted, turning to a cold, familiar despair. The world was deaf to a man who had nothing. Defeated, I retreated back into the relative anonymity of the park. My eyes scanned the urban landscape, searching for another option, any option. And then I saw it, standing like a relic from a forgotten era on the street corner, a phone booth. A surge of adrenaline, the first I'd felt in years, cut through the fog of my hunger and exhaustion. I fumbled in the pocket of my coat, my fingers closing around the 2 precious quarters I'd been saving for a hot coffee. This was more important. I lurched toward the booth, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stepped inside the glass and metal box, pulling the heavy door closed. For a moment, the roar of the city was muffled, and I was in my own small, private world. The phone receiver was cold and heavy in my hand, a solid, tangible link to a world I was no longer a part of. As I dropped the coins into the slot, the metallic clang echoed in the small space. I dialed 911, my fingers stiff and clumsy. The phone began to ring, a shrill, piercing sound. Bring, bring. And in that sound, in the space between the rings, the years fell away. The grimy phone booth dissolved around me, and I was standing in a different place, a place of bright, fluorescent lights and the constant, reassuring hum of activity. I was wearing a different uniform, one of blue, crisp fabric, the weight of a badge heavy and comforting on my chest. My name was Arthur Corrigan. I was a cop. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had been a police officer for 25 years. Not just a cop, but a damn good one. I had walked these same city streets not as a ghost, but as a guardian. I had been a man of purpose, a man who people looked to for help, not away from in disgust. I had believed in the shield, in the promise of protection and service. I had stood for something. Burring, burring. A face flashed in my memory. A young kid, fresh out of the academy, his face shining with a mixture of terror and unbridled idealism. His name was Miller, David Miller. He had been assigned to me, his first patrol partner. He was smart, eager, but green. I saw the potential in him. the core of decency that made a good cop. I took him under my wing. I taught him how to talk to people, not just at them. I taught him that the law was a tool, but compassion was the hand that wielded it. "Remember, kid," I'd told him on 1,000 different stakeouts, "we're not just enforcers. We're the last line of defense for the helpless, for the ones with no voice. Never forget that." The irony was a bitter pill. I was one of them now, one of the voiceless. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice, calm and professional, snapped me back to the present. I cleared my throat, the ghost of Officer Corrigan rising from the ashes of the homeless man. I'm reporting an act of animal cruelty in progress, I said, my voice steadier now, the old cadence of authority returning without a conscious thought. Central Park, southeast quadrant, approximately 200 yards north of the Wallman Rank entrance. You'll find 2 German Shepherds and 2 felines, duct-taped to an oak tree. There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, can you repeat that? Duct-taped?" "That is correct, ma'am," I said, my voice flat and precise. "There is also a note indicating intent to let the animals perish from starvation. The situation is urgent." I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. "Okay, sir. We're dispatching a unit to that location. Can you give me your name?" My name? What was my name? Arthur Corrigan was dead. The man holding the phone was just a ghost. "There's no time," I said, and gently hung up the phone. My quarters were gone. The call was made. My duty, as a citizen, was done. I should have walked away, faded back into the gray, but the memory of the badge, the echo of my own words to a young rookie named Miller, they held me fast. The last line of defense for the helpless misfits. I couldn't just leave them there, waiting. I turned and walked back to the tree. My steps were certain now. The animals were still there, a tableau of silent suffering. The panting dog's breaths were coming in ragged, shallow gasps. The kittens hadn't moved, their eyes locked in a state of sheer terror. "Who could have done this to you?" I whispered, my voice thick with an anger that felt clean and righteous. "Who?" I looked down at the collection of plastic bags at my feet, the sum total of my worldly possessions. Inside one, among a tangle of string, old newspapers, and a half-bar of soap, was a small utility knife. It was a tool I used for everything, cutting cardboard to sleep on, opening discarded packages, 100 other small tasks of survival. The blade was small, but it was sharp. I didn't wait for the sirens. The helplessness of the past hour fell away, replaced by the certainty of action. The cop wasn't dead after all. He was just dormant. "It's okay," I murmured, approaching the tree slowly, my movements calm and non-threatening. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help." The rigid dog flinched, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The kittens pressed themselves impossibly flatter against the bark. "Easy, boy, easy," I crooned. I took out the utility knife, the small blade glinting in the pale sunlight. With painstaking care, I began to saw at the thick, silver layers of duct tape. It was slow work. The tape was strong, and my hands were weak and trembling, not from fear, but from cold and malnutrition. I worked from the top down, freeing the first kitten. It remained frozen for a second before scrambling onto the dog's back, seeking refuge. I cut the second band, freeing the other kitten, which immediately burrowed its face into the thick fur of the shepherd next to it. Then I started on the dogs. It was harder, the tape wrapped tight around their chests and legs. The growling dog fell silent, as if he understood my intent. He stood perfectly still, his warm breath fogging in the cool air, his intelligent eyes fixed on my face. As I severed the last piece of tape, a pair of uniformed officers came jogging across the lawn. A young man and a young woman, their faces alert and serious. "Sir, step away from the animals. Drop the knife," the male officer commanded, his hand resting on the butt of his sidearm. I immediately dropped the utility knife and raised my empty hands. "It's all right, officer," I said, my voice calm. "I'm the one who called. I was just cutting them loose." Their posture relaxed slightly, but they remained wary. They saw what I was, a homeless man with a knife. The context didn't matter. The costume was everything. The female officer knelt to check on the animals, while her partner approached me. "We're going to need you to come down to the precinct to give a full statement," he said. It wasn't a request. The ride to the station was a surreal journey back in time. I had been in the back of 100 squad cars, but always in the front seat. The precinct was the 19th, my old stomping grounds. The smell was the same, stale coffee, disinfectant, and the faint metallic tang of human desperation. They put me in a small, bare interview room. I sat there, a ghost at the feast, watching the life of the precinct buzz around me, a world I knew intimately but could no longer touch. An hour later, the door opened. A detective came in, a man in his late 30s, his face etched with the weary cynicism of the job. He carried a file. "You're the one who found the animals in the park?" he asked, his tone flat. "Yes," I said. "I used to be on the job. Corrigan, Arthur Corrigan, retired." The lie felt clumsy, but it was easier than the truth. The detective nodded, unimpressed. He asked his questions, and I gave my statement, clearly and concisely. As he was finishing up, the door opened again. A uniformed officer leaned in. "Sarge, we got a positive ID on the animals. They were microchipped, registered to a guy who was evicted last week. Neighbor said he was threatening to get rid of them. We're picking them up now." "Good," the detective grunted. He stood up to leave. "Thanks for your help, Mr. Corrigan. You're free to go." Free to go where? Back to my bench? Back to being invisible? As I stood up, my old, tired bones protesting, a different officer walked past the open doorway. He was older than the others I had seen, maybe in his early 40s, with sergeant stripes on his sleeve. He glanced into the room, a casual passing look, and then he stopped dead in his tracks. He backed up slowly, his eyes fixed on my face. "Davy, don't," he said, holding up a hand. "You taught me what it means to wear the shield. This is me paying back a small piece of that lesson." A thought occurred to me then, a desperate, hopeful plea. "The animals," I said, "the dogs and the kittens. What will happen to them?" "They'll go to the city shelter," Miller said. "They'll be cleaned up, cared for, they'll find homes." I thought of them in cold, loud cages. I thought of my new, empty apartment. I thought of the profound, crushing loneliness that had been my only companion for a decade. "No," I said, my voice finding a strength I didn't know it had. "Let them come with me, please. I'm a lonely old man. They were abandoned, just like me. I think we could be a family." Miller looked at me, a long, searching look, and then he smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his tear-filled eyes. "I think," he said, "that's the best damned idea I've heard all day." And so it was. My new life began not with a key to an apartment, but with 4 sets of paws. The apartment was small, but to me it was a palace. It had a soft chair, a warm bed, and a window that looked out over the city. But its best feature was the life that now filled it. We named them. The 2 German shepherds, brothers, became Justice and Honor. The twin tabby kittens, sisters, became Grace and Hope. They were my shadow, my companions, my reason to get up in the morning. Justice, the serious one, would lay his head on my lap. Honor, the playful one, would bring me his toys. Grace would curl up on my chest, her purr a tiny engine of contentment, while Hope would perch on my shoulder, an inquisitive little gargoyle. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I sit in my armchair by the fire, the dogs at my feet, the cats curled on my lap. The cold is gone, replaced by a warmth that has nothing to do with the flames in the hearth. I think back to that gray morning in the park, to the horrifying tableau at the base of that old oak tree. I had thought I was a ghost, invisible to the world, but those 4 helpless creatures, they saw me, and in saving them, in forcing me to be seen, they ended up saving me. We were all useless creatures, discarded by a world that didn't want us, but we found each other. And in the quiet warmth of our small home, we built a new world. A world where we were not just useless, but essential. A world where we were not just survivors, but a family.